Welcome to the Beacon Way Executive Series podcast. Take a look behind the scenes of business and digital agency experience with Adrienne, Jennifer, and Ken. These award-winning executives of Beacon Media and Marketing share personal stories, deep insights, and hot takes, and even a few controversial perspectives on leadership and business in the current timing of the world. We are back with our executive series with the Beacon Way podcast. Got myself, Ken Okonek, Adrienne, Wilkerson, and Jennifer Christensen. We're really excited to unpack this subject today, right? So we are talking about hiring the best. I'm excited to really talk about our wins and our lessons, right? The areas where we've learned and we're working on learning right now and continuing to grow. And I think that we'll never arrive the peak of what we want here, but we're constantly fighting to being as great in that as we possibly can. So who wants to start?
Well, I can say you were just telling me a story the other day, Jen, that was really powerful. I think it had with Steve Jobs. I'd love to hear that story again for the audience.
This is something I've struggled with a lot, so I'm definitely changing my mindset about it. And seeing Steve Jobs talk about what part of his secret sauce was at Apple made so much sense to me, and looking at it from the perspective I'm in now. But basically what he said is that he feels like one of the strongest things that he did as a leader was made sure that he hired A players. He really looked for the absolute best of the best in the different departments that he had. Mm-hmm. And that was a challenge for him to always find those people. But he said the thing that really surprised him is when he got 2 or 3 people in a group. He had it all set up as different groups in the company. But as he had 2 or 3 people that would come together that were all A players, they were so excited to work together because they really hadn't had that opportunity before in other businesses. They might have been the one really pulling that business forward and dealing with people that weren't carrying their weight. We all know that feeling from high school when you get a group project and you're the one that stays up and does it. So anyway, so he said what happened is they actually got very protective of wanting to keep only the people that were doing the best in their department. And they started advocating for being part of the hiring process and making sure that the people that were coming in were also going to be really working at the same level that they were. They did not want to be held back anymore. They were able to be innovative and creative and do great things because they were all at that same level. And I think there's massive truth in that. I think we've seen just little glimpses of that in our company. And again, like I said, this has helped change my perspective because I used to think it was almost being mean to think about people that way because everybody has potential. There's truth to that. We all know that. Everybody has potential. Everybody can change. Everybody can be coached. It doesn't mean you are the best person or the best fit, though, for every job. So I think that's the differentiation for me.
Yeah. I think what I would love to double click into, Adrienne, is that we talk about recruiting for the best, right? And I know that you've done so many amazing things to go and actually find the best. Because I think hearing that story, Jen, is like, where do we get those A players? Right. How do we recruit them? How do we get them and how do we keep them? And so I would love to just kind of unpack some of the things that I know that we've worked really hard on and where we've done well and where we definitely could, improve on to be able to find those A players.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that generally pushed on actually early on in the process that was one of the things that made a really big impact on me. And at first I was kind of like, I don't have time for that. But one of the things that we do in our recruiting process now is I found ways to automate it. So that made me excited because I could do what Jen really was pushing for. And I knew she was right. I just couldn't figure out a way to do it and survive when we would maybe have 5 or 6 positions open at once. And we had hundreds of people applying all at the same time. And it came out of Jen's passion for customer service. And so one of the things that we do that I've seen make a huge impact for us, especially with those A players, is we have it so that when somebody applies to Beacon through our system, they get an email immediately that tells them, we hear you. We got your resume. We got your application. We're going to be working on it. And we'll respond one way or the other within the next, however many days, given amount of time. And that's a small thing, but I will say once I figured out a way to get that into place and we started doing it, I really started noticing a difference when I would actually get to the interview stage. And just the response of people going, just the fact that you told me you actually got my thing, and they know it's an automated email, but they're like, I've turned in dozens of resumes and nobody even bothers. I never even know if they got it or not. And so one thing that I just keep consistently being amazed, and we see this throughout our industry and business in general, it's those little details that tend to make a huge difference. And so that's a very simple thing that's made a big difference over the years for us once we really figured out a way to do it without overloading our recruiting team. And now we've started bringing our team leads in, to Jen's point, and to follow up kind of on her story with Steve Jobs, bringing our team leads into the conversation has been really impactful, not only for our team leads to feel like they're engaged, because our team leads are A players and they get a lot more involvement and control and say in who comes onto their team. And that's been so rewarding to get to work with them and coach them through. And even on a goofy side, watch them agonize too over who we're actually hiring. And when they see, oh my God, there's like 4 really good candidates. How do you decide? And it's like, oh, yeah, that is the hard part. And how lucky are we when you get, 2 or 3 really good candidates to have to make a decision on? But I would say the biggest differentiator for us is choosing to hire for culture first and prioritizing that.
I was glad you said that. I really wanted to make sure that we talked about that, because I think that that's a huge, not only recruiting part, but also I think filtering part once we actually maybe do make a decision. Because let's all be honest, we've hired people and that's not what we thought.
Yeah.
Maybe that wasn't what we wanted or what we thought it would be very quickly after we onboarded.
Yeah.
Because we've developed the culture to be as strong as we have now, I think that has been really encouraging for me. Of the few missteps that we've made where somebody wasn't quite the right fit for culture is the amount that the rest of the team is behind that. Right. So now it's not, again, it's that same concept like Steve was talking about. When you get something really good, then everybody feels that ownership of that, and they know that anything outside of that is going to affect them. Right. If there's negativity or there's gossip or any of that type of stuff, you think, oh, it's not a big deal. It's just one person. But everybody who's worked in any environment knows that it's just like cancer. And so the fact that they have that ownership piece and they're so engaged in that has been really encouraging for me to see that.
And there's a big difference, because I think some people could hear that and be like, oh, I don't want people to be gossipy, or they don't want people like talking about people behind their back. It's not even like that, right? It's like our team that are those A players are coming to us. Hey, these are the values of our company. This is what I'm very proud of, be a part of the company. And this is what I'm feeling when it comes to this department or this employee. And I'm just concerned. And it changes the entire dynamic of how we obviously diagnose what's going on there and to get, the reality of what the situation is. And then how we bring in our coaching systems to make sure that we are doing our best by that person, because we had made a decision to that person, and making sure that we are protecting the culture. Because I think if the culture erodes like cancer, like you're talking about, everything else will falter after that.
That's true.
Yeah. Well, Jen and I definitely had an era at Beacon where the culture got really toxic. And I know both of us kind of had this moment or two where we kind of felt like we woke up one day and it was like, what happened? This is not the culture we wanted. How did it get here? And so when we say now that we are really proud of our culture, in part it's because we understand even what a bad culture is, because we allowed that to happen.
Right.
And we had to make some really tough decisions, and they started with us. And they started with us looking internally at each of us, at each other and our relationship, and what are we doing that is allowing this, to populate. And part of it, we made some really bad hires, and then we gave them a lot more authority than we should have ever given. I mean, it was like a double whammy. We did the worst of both, and we had to own that and face that. And a lot of it, at least for me, was coming out of my own insecurity and fear, and having to face that in myself, and where did I need to grow and develop to work through those things and get beyond that. And it was a pretty intense personal battle that both of Jen and I fought together, and it brought us closer, which in turn allowed us to really understand what we needed to do and change. And so it's part of why we're so passionate about the culture now, because we know what it's like. We had that kind of idealistic, at least I did, oh yeah, we're never going to be like that. And then it was like, oh God, we're like that. What happened? So that that was pretty intense to have to realize that we allowed that kind of a thing.
The like statement that I have from what you just said is that if your culture sucks, look at yourself as a leader. You are responsible for that. You allowed that to happen. And for me, it was like a very defining moment. I remember walking into work one day and thinking, I don't want to be here. I literally don't want to be in this office. I do not want to, like, it wasn't the work or anything of that. I was just like, I would like to leave now. And then I thought, but wait a minute. I own part of this company. That's a serious problem. It's not about having a bad day. It was like recognizing I did not like the environment that I was working in. And then going, but that's my job. I'm supposed to be making the environment, right? I'm not a victim to that. That's what we're supposed to do as leaders. I also saw Barbara Corcoran last night. Like I said, this stuff's all coming up on my feed now that my husband and I are talking about business all the time. But Barbara Corcoran last night said when she first started her firm, she hired like the best of the best in New York City as far as real estate agents. She was attracting all these great people. But a lot of them were like complainers and toxic and divas. And she had a very similar experience to what I experienced, where she walked in one day and said, I don't like this. Like, I don't want to be around people like this. This is not the culture I wanted. And she made a decision from that day forward that she would only hire people that were positive. It's her business and she gets to choose. And so she was like ruthless about it and changed her entire culture. And it's never gone back since. We each have our thing, but there has to be something, I think, as a leader to recognize first and foremost, this is your responsibility. This is your direction, however it goes.
And I think of like early on, and obviously you guys have already done a lot of work when I came into the fold of the trifecta of us. But I remember, and Michelle is making the podcast here, but she was an account manager at the time. And I didn't even have authority over operations or anything at that point. I was just sales, but obviously I was working with everyone. And I was like, hey, I really have major concerns with XYZ. I think we're feeding in negativity to our clients around the pandemic. And I remember you, Jen, like, I need to stop you right there. If we're going to be talking behind people. And I'm like, no, I'm not talking behind Michelle's back whatsoever. I'm actually going to like literally, after you guys get my A-OK on this, I'm going to go and talk to her right about this straight to her face. And that was like, I think a really interesting and fun time, right? Because I just won't say anything that I wouldn't be willing to say behind someone's back if I wouldn't say it to them right it as well. And if I can't say it when they're not in the room or when they are in the room, then I won't say it when they're not in the room. I think you've really seen a lot of that start to show in a lot of our team members, right? Really solving complex issues sometimes without us even having to be in it, which is a really cool thing, right? Is if we can start to ascend away from being connected to every single fire that we have to put out, man, does it make a big difference in company culture and your ability to bring better things to the table for our clients, or at least the services you lead as an organization or a leader in a company.
Yeah, part of our job as business owners, as leaders, is to build a team that can manage itself and not have to be involved all the time in every piece.
Yeah. I love that you brought up that story though, because that I remember having one of those moments after that conversation of just thinking, wow, you really are aligned with our culture. Because those moments are going to come up and then you see where somebody aligns. And I was like, awesome. Like you really are honest and direct and willing to put it out there and not afraid of conflict. And definitely you're less afraid of conflict than I am in general. But just seeing like that was such a cool moment. And it's obviously grown so much further from there. But I have a question for you, Ken. I've wondered about this a lot. I know you highly value coaching, right? And you're so good at coaching. I've seen really a lot of team members transform and just like come more into who they are. So how do you balance that with the concept of, okay, you have to hire a player from the beginning, but then also looking at coaching as a way to help people just become even better? Is that how you look at it? Because I think sometimes like in the business world, I've heard them almost separate. It's almost, oh, we can coach somebody up into anything we want them to be, or with the right coaching, that person. But we're saying the opposite of that right now. We're saying, no, we really do need to get somebody who is absolutely great at what they do. So how do you balance those two? I don't know if I'm asking that question very well, but
how do we, set the right standard from culture and recruiting and get the best people in? But then how do we take people that are, not maybe say the A talent, maybe they're a B or something, and how do we do our best to get them to A? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. What's your philosophy around that? Because I know you value coaching so much. You've had great success with it. It's almost like that nature nurture like conversation, right? Like how much is it of the person is there, and is there like the certain traits that we know make an A player, and how much are our A
Can
players
we
more
actually
coachable?
coach up?
So a couple of things that I think come top of mind is I think first is to be a really good coach is you have to learn to be self-aware and coach yourself first, right? Because that speaks in such a heavy way, because when you're leading people, especially in operations, they know like when you bring someone in and they spend time with you, like you're growing and they feel your growth. And so then it in a way you rub off onto other people and they grow in that way. And so that is one major area where I think people can be a B plus and go to an A or something like that. I also think of like 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. John C. Maxwell really encapsulates, there's different lids of leadership, and he really rates it from a scale of 1 to 10. And like, and it kind of makes a point to what I'm saying before is, you know, a 5 can't lead an 8, right? An 8's only going to get led by a 9 or a 10. And so if you're always raising your skill, it allows you to be able to see that. But you also can find that soft skills and hard skills are very different things. And I think that when we look at the soft skills of the person, the nature side of things, I think we're always recruiting for A players. The things that can be taught, that can be read in a book, that can be given to a course, those are easy to get coached up all the time. And I think that those even make your soft skills get better once you learn the skill around increasing your hard skills through your soft skills. And so that's how I would differentiate it. Is I think that I would always look at the person and be like, okay, the character of this person is so high. You know, their communication is so high. Their self-awareness is really good. They have great discernment. They have empathy. You know, these are things that I can't teach you to be more empathetic. You either do or you don't have it. And I think that's where our culture makes it really easy to be able to coach in the operation things, because we are looking for those soft skills to start. And then we're filling in the hard skills to make them the A player we need for those roles or those positions. So those are probably the 3 points that I think of.
And that makes so much sense. Even take it back to Steve Jobs, like his examples. So he was bringing in all these people to do something that had never been done before. Yes, they needed to have certain like aptitudes for engineering or design or those things. But what is it that really made them the A players? I believe it was that incredible like emotional intelligence and the ability to learn, the ability to innovate, you grow, think outside the box, right? Those are all things that you really can't teach as well, right? But you could definitely coach and give direction on what you're looking
You can
for.
refine them.
Yeah. So that's,
refine those skills.
and I think that gets confusing for
And
people too, because they think, well, you have to hire somebody who's like the best at this particular job, but that isn't always the case.
no, and again, the important part that I want every business owner or executive that's listening to this is to know that like your business culture and environment may be different than ours. And so the soft skills and hard skills in a combination of those may be different. And you just need to know what that is for you. And then that becomes your filter system for recruiting. The thing that I really want to encourage is that the more you work on yourself, the more those things will accentuate in the team of people around you. It's better to have them and then you can recruit more, because that's the problem, right? If you have a recruiter or people that are doing the hiring and firing of it and they're 5s and you're trying to get 8s, you're never going to get 8s because they're never going to follow a 5. And so being able to constantly grow in those skills and learn that you can grow in those skills. If you need someone, let's say it's a position that is forward facing and they need to be way more relationship skilled. They need to have way more empathy and great communication skills of asking questions. Could you get someone to get from a 5 to a 9 in that over an extended period of time in many book clubs and personal reflection journals and coaching? Yeah, but like you're actually doing them a disservice to hire them if that's what you know you need at that position, right? You need to know that beforehand and then recruit the right person, because it's going to take way too long for them and the company. And again, like you said earlier, Jen, it's up to you as the leader to be in control of it. So if you got a crappy culture, you got to look at the mirror and not at the people around you and say like, oh, I got to get rid of these people and go get new people and make my culture better. It's up to you.
Yeah.
Well, and Predictive Index is a tool we started using this year, and I really love their perspective on this. It really helped reconcile a couple of things that I'd always struggled with. And one of them was, the adage, you hire for culture, you can teach the rest. And that's just not true in that much of a black and white statement.
It's not.
It's not. And there's nuances to that I think there's truth in, but that as a statement, and And yet it is one that is preached, that statement is thrown around ad nauseum in the business community. And if you don't agree, there's something wrong. And so part of what Predictive Index helped me kind of classify in my brain, I guess, or categorize in my brain, was based on what both of you were saying too, is you can have somebody who is a good culture fit for the company, but not a good fit for the position you're hiring for. And they may have fantastic soft skills, but if you're hiring for an engineering position, you can't put a creative in there. They're never going to be able to stretch enough. If they're creative, they're all over the place. Part of their creative process, their ADD thinking and their randomness, and that is part of what makes them a powerful creative. If you stick them in an engineering situation where they have to be concrete and linear and very super organized and everything has to happen in just the right order, they're going to emotionally die, and vice versa. And so it's not necessarily that the statement is blanket incorrect, but there is so much nuance in there that statement misses. And so that's one thing that I struggled with a lot of times. And I made some bad hiring decisions because I'm like, well, this person's a great culture fit, and we can teach them the other things. And then they just crashed and burned and they were miserable. And so we were frustrated as business owners, and this is not working. And the predictive index system has helped us identify, okay, do we need somebody who's more on the dominant side or more on the agreeable side versus unagreeable? What does this position need? And then you combine, yes, they need to be a culture fit, and they need to be a good fit for that position and what that position needs. Even the soft skills that position needs, because the soft skills needed for, again, almost the biggest contradiction is an engineer versus a creative. Or you get a really hardcore engineer person and you put them in a position where they got to talk to people all day, they're going to burn out by like 10 a.m. So that one really helped me because I'm like, what am I doing wrong here? I was like, and I didn't feel like the statement was entirely right, but the part of hiring for culture first always resonated with me.
Right.
And,
Right.
I think you can train somebody and coach somebody up past a certain point, but like to your even leadership scale point that Maxwell does such a good job with, if they're only a 5 on the linear concrete thinking scale and your job needs a 9, just as an example, you're going to be frustrated with that person and they're going to be miserable because they're never going to be able to get there. And that's just not how they're hardwired.
Yeah.
So trying to force them to adapt that much, and everybody can adapt a certain amount, and we always do in life, right? We adapt a little bit depending on who we're interacting with or the situation. But if we're requiring employees to adapt to a significant level, that's almost always going to end up in burnout at some point, probably for us as employers as well as that person.
So I think this summary is basically it's the combination between the culture, and so like the culture and then how they're wired, right? What their strengths are, I guess we could say, or what that piece of it. So it's that combination. I think it's a perfect analogy actually when we're talking about marketing, because it's like the culture would be like the brand of marketing, and then how they're wired would be like the market. And the two have to mix, like the two have to be a good fit. You have to have both for it to be successful. Like Steve Jobs' analogy wouldn't work if he didn't hire people that were engineers. They had an incredible aptitude for building computers and building something new, right? Or if I tried to do bookkeeping, that would be horrible.
Right.
Or if you tried to have his engineers design an iPhone.
Right.
Or design the app within there, it wouldn't be as beautiful as it is.
Because he had designers do that. Yep.
Exactly. And so I think, to some points that I'm taking out of this is just knowing that different jobs require different skills, both soft skills and hard skills, right? I think that there's certain things where like I can't hire a department lead that has amazing knowledge but terrible communication skills, right? Because you could have a 10 in knowledge in web development, but if your ability to communicate is a 4, that means you only can actually lead people at a 4 level in web, right? Because you don't have the communication skills able to actually lead that person in the right way. And so I think it's really important for people to be able to, and even if maybe you don't know everything you want in every position from the soft skills and the hard skills, maybe you just start the areas of what you don't want, right? You're like, okay, for this position, I don't want this. Okay, this person, I don't want this. And then you can start to hone in from there, because it's all about getting more and more lasered focus for it. And you're not going to be able to like sit this out, brain map this one time and be like, all right, here's my whole hierarchy, and this is what the soft skills and hard skills I need for this position. But you're going to mess up. But I think if you constantly just learn one thing every single time, okay, this hire worked great. Okay, what went well about that hire? Okay, let's learn from that. Okay, this hire did not work great. What's something I learned from that? Again, the wins and lessons, you're going to get honed in a lot better. And we're still working on this process as we speak with current employees. But it's important to look at your current hierarchy and start to know, what do you want? What don't you want? And then be able to work backwards from there. I think of an exercise that we were getting mentoring and coaching, and it's probably the most profound exercise about all of that I just love so much is, and I know we brought it up several different times in just like our executive work. Okay, we're going to go start a new business tomorrow, hypothetically. And we have our entire team. Who are we keeping exactly in the same places? Are we promoting anyone to certain places if we're starting the new business? Who are the people that we like them, maybe for the culture, but maybe, we'd put them over here instead of over here. And then who are the people you wouldn't hire again? This is such a transformative exercise for people that are maybe looking at this to really get a good level of where you're at and where some major opportunities to help go, maybe have the chance to work on your culture and hire the right A player, or the A player for you, right? Maybe not for us, but for you, to then start to grow you and take you to the next level, like some of the stories we've talked about today.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love it.
Awesome. Well, any fleeting thoughts before we wrap this one up for everyone?
No, but we will put in like Predictive Index and a couple of the tools that we use. We'll put in those links to the podcast, because I think that's one of the big takeaways that could really help people.
Yeah. I think one of my big takeaways is just don't be afraid to try something and learn from it working and not working, because you can get so afraid to make a mistake hiring and what's going to be the cost of that you never try anything. And that really means you're never going to learn anything. So try it, make a mistake, learn, and do it better next time. Like you said, Ken, every time you just learn something different.
And I want to make sure that we don't come across as robots here, right? Like, I get what Adrienne's saying. We understand that means hire someone, then fire someone.
Yeah.
And you're going to get better at this,
easy.
right? I mean, I've fired hundreds of people. It may be even close to 1,000 now, 15 or 18, working time. I've done a lot. The fitness industry had a lot more than the marketing industry, thankfully, in that situation. But I will say that the great thing is you are the leader. So if it's going to happen, it's up to you, right? And you have to know that if you do make a mistake, you need to move on it quickly. There's nothing worse than letting your emotions get so tied to your business, because I will say hiring a bad employee is definitely bad for your company. But holding on to a bad employee because of emotion or relation is 10 times worse for your business and the people that are already performing really well in your business. And so I really want to make sure that you know that that's a part of it, because I know, again, it is messy. It's hard. It's not easy, but I can tell you the price that you pay to not get out of your own way and terminate that person if they aren't a right fit for your company to go get an A player. It's far greater if you keep them or try to make it work to work around their idiosyncrasies that aren't fitting for the culture or the hard skills for the position.
Yeah. Very well said.
Well, thanks everyone for being a part of this executive series. And we look forward to sharing those tools with you and maybe what skills or what things that you guys do to recruit for A players. I would love to hear some of those things in, the messages or the emails, and contact us about that, because this is something that we need to always improve on. But I know this is what works for us, and I'm excited to hear what feedback other people have when it comes to that. Thank you for joining the Beacon Way Executive Session. New episodes drop every week. Make sure you never miss one. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.